Hello, and thanks for joining me for another gardening episode. This episode is a real quick update on what I've been doing with some of my garden items. This is the last of the rosemary and thyme that I had left over drying in my indoor garden. It may be mint, but this is the last of any herbs that I had drying indoors that I'm now putting into containers to put into the spice cabinet. To save them, since they are just straight out of the garden and dried, I do put like a silica packet in there to make sure that the moisture doesn't collect in the container. But I didn't have many herbs at the beginning of the season to even dry. With our crazy spring that heated up really quickly in May, a lot of the herbs went right to seed or just died off. So what I collected in the spring is pretty precious that I was able to get any. My plan is to do this again in the fall. Hopefully with the weather turning cooler, I will be able to get a better harvest. But I also collected some of the buds from the remaining lavender. I didn't want to collect too much lavender in the summer because the bees and the butterfly were really attracted to the lavender, and I like bringing the pollinators in. But I was able to collect quite a bit of lavender at the end of the season. I also dried out one of my sunflower heads. It was one of the largest ones that the birds didn't get to, since my sunflowers in the yard are somewhere between 10 and 12 foot tall. And when I do my sunflower heads, I like to pick them and dry them outdoors for the most part in the same mesh bags that I use for collecting the fruit or covering the fruit, like the squash and the smaller melons. This one wasn't completely dry. There were some wet spots, so it is kind of hard to get the seeds out for it. And the seeds went right back to the chickens. But I collect them in a mesh bag because there's usually spiders and worms that end up nesting in them when I dry them out without any protective covering. So when I collected or took the seeds out this time, there were minimal bugs that were in between the seeds, which was a bonus for me. The last tomato to ripen in the yard is this Brandywine. It was planted last, as I was unsure how many tomatoes I would actually end up with given some of the problems I had, but it seems to be doing well. I know it is very susceptible to disease and will be the first one to die out. So I'm keeping a close eye on any yellowing with this particular tomato, and I'm hoping for the best. The blueberries were quite productive this season, but it's time for me to let these 5 just establish more roots and get healthier for the next season. So I have taken the cover off since there's only a few left on the branches. Some of them got pretty beat up with the heat, and I'll have to consider keeping them under shade. And then over here past the blackberries, I have the pink lemonade blueberry, which I am considering whether or not I'm going to move it over with the other blueberries, because I think the blackberries might end up shading it out. But overall, the berries from this season are looking really good, even if I didn't get a harvest. And lastly, I had to say goodbye to the compost gourd. It ended up being sort of like a carnival squash, but there were tons and tons of squash bugs and squash bug eggs and nymphs on this plant, and I could not in good faith keep this in the garden. So I had to totally take it out, and this is what the compost pile looks like now, all sad and empty, but no additional squash bugs to worry about. And that ends this update for this week. Really quick, I thank you for sticking to the end. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.